Yeah, Jesus is our champion. Oh, so good. Jesus is our champion. Just so great to hear the awesome thing that God is doing in our lives, and just like to hear the testimonies of how God is literally just turning it up on fire. Come on, like just so good. Just so awesome. I just am so excited to be here with you guys tonight. God is going to do some amazing things, and it's going to be really fun. And I just want to encourage and start off by saying, God is attacking fear. Yeah. Yeah, I was hearing the voice, I was just hearing God, and he was just saying, I'm just jealous for my kids. He said, I am violently attacking down fear. And I just speak that over us tonight, that God is violently attacking fear, and God is jealous for his kids. And he's saying fear is losing its hold. I'm breaking it down. It does not have a voice. It does not have a stronghold, and it is gone. I broke the power of fear when I died on the cross, and I'm going after it with a vengeance and a ferocity that man has not known. Oh, so good. There's a song by Kim Walker, this "Unstoppable Love," and it says, like, that your love just came violently and just broke through my walls and just broke through and tore down. And just even as we were singing Reckless Love tonight, I just was just totally hearing the Father's heart just saying, I'm going after fear. He's like, my kids need to know that I just am so jealously in love for them, and that I don't want anybody else to have their ear. Fear does not have that. So, so good. What I really feel is on my heart, and what I feel like God's just really speaking is he wants to speak about trust and encountering him in his unconditional love, and that in order to encounter God's unconditional love, the voice of fear has to die. And just in myself, like these past 2 months or so, maybe even 3 months, like God's been in this journey with me where he's been showing me where the voice of fear has been trying to speak. And what's crazy is, like, for those of you guys who have heard Teresa speak, she oftentimes speaks about, this is the inner healing, this is the voice in our heart. We have to, learn to distinguish what God is saying, what's our heart hearing, what is our heart feeling. And in that, like, we always heard the phrase, fear is the protector, and that sometimes we need to go back and break up the contract we made with fear to say that, no, fear, you're not going to protect me, and God's going to protect me. And intellectually, I understood, okay, it's great to break up contracts, it's great to do this, but I didn't really understand the concept of what it means for fear to be my protector, because I was like, last time I checked, like, fear protecting me sounds like a really awful thing. And I don't know why in any sane mind I would ever decide to have fear protect me. I was like, I don't know why I'm repenting of this, because like I don't see in my rational mind why I'd ever want to partner with fear to protect me, because I feel like I'm constantly trying to run away from fear. Like, so that concept just like kind of doesn't make any sense to me. And literally, like, I feel like just in the past, like 6 months, like just at the beginning of this year even, like God's been just so, like, it's been like highlighting that in my relationships with my family and my relationships when I'm in my community and I'm talking about inner healing, and just like, okay, like what's fear speaking about? And then like God's been just slowly and surely showing me, like, Michael, the fear has a voice, and when you give the enemy a place to speak into your heart, fear literally has a voice, and fear actually speaks to you if you let him speak to you and if you partner with it. And that if you partner with fear for so long, there comes a point in time when you can't distinguish when fear is speaking and when your own heart is speaking, because your heart has bought the doctrine of fear for so long that it feels like you speaking, and you don't understand the difference between when I'm scared and then when it's like, oh, like this is just how my heart naturally processes. It's kind of like what we've been talking about with inner healing, where when in our mind, when we have a pathway that we've been creating, right? It's like the neural pathway that, for example, like if I enjoy eating ice cream, right? And every, Thursday night I come home, and every Sunday night I come home and I eat ice cream. If I do that for long enough, then every night I come home, I'm going to want ice cream, because that's a habit I made, right? And it's the same thing in my life. If fear is trying to speak to me, especially when I'm younger or in places in my life, the more I listen to that, I say, oh yeah, that's true, or oh yeah, that's true. And like the best way I can describe it is that like it's like the enemy, he comes next to us, just like in the Garden of Eden. He comes next to Eve and he like whispers like, that God, God doesn't love you, or like, that's a scary thing. And that's literally what happens is that we're in our life and the enemy tries to whisper something, and we can stand here and say, oh yeah, like that sounded right, like Eve did, right? And Eve was like, oh yeah, like no. Like I want to eat of the fruit that God told me not to because God is not good, that God is withholding something from me, that, I want to be like God, and I'm buying that, right? I'm buying into what the enemy's selling me, and then I say, and if I do that enough, like one time, okay, that's great, second time, that's not good, but like the more I do this, the more my heart starts bending to that, and then there comes a point in time where the enemy doesn't have to talk to me anymore because that voice of fear that he's been trying to speak into me becomes programmed because I programmed it. We understand the enemy doesn't have power to program us. The enemy doesn't have power to control us, but he only has the power to influence. And if he influences us and I buy his influence, and the best way to think of it is like the enemy is like a salesman. A salesman can't make me buy a car, right? The salesman can't spend my money, but the salesman is there to speak as loud as he can, to use marketing as much as he can, and if I can choose to buy what the enemy's trying to sell me, but the enemy can't buy it for me, right? And I can return, and the best part is, because of Jesus, I can return whatever I bought from the enemy. Come on. He buys it back. He says, okay, you might have bought what the enemy tried to sell you, but guess what? You can refund it. I can buy it back. I buy back what you thought you bought, and guess what? It's not yours anymore. So I just, oh man, that was so good. Come on, Jesus. So good, so good. Oh my gosh. Yeah, come on, Jesus. Yeah, he can't spend our money. He can't even he can't do anything for us. We literally just have to choose to say no. And when those moments we can say, you can persuade me as much as you want, you can do this as much as you want, but I'm not going to take it. And I'm not going to take what you're selling me. And for me, I realized in my life, I had bought what the enemy was trying to sell me. I bought that voice of fear that spoke suspicion, that spoke doubt, that spoke deception, and I constantly bought it to the point that I took what he was selling. But by God's grace, for the past year, I'm refunding that voice. And I'm saying, no, I'm not taking what you're trying to sell me anymore. I'm giving it back to God because God knows how to cancel debts, and he's going to get rid of it. He's going to cancel the debt. He's going to say, you're refunded, you're paid in full, and you're not taking it anymore. So it's so exciting. So anyway, just all that to just set the stage, so good, so good. All right, so if you guys want to go with me, I'm going to read pretty quickly, so you can follow. That's great. We're in Psalms 145, and Passion Translation for tonight, just because of what it's carrying. And just as a reminder, if you don't have the Passion Translation with you in print, you can use the Bible Gateway app, and they have a free translation available on there. Even if you go online to Bible Gateway, you can actually get a free translation of that. So if you like what is being read, you can get access to it. So that was my sales pitch for the night. All right, so anyway, we're back in Psalms 145, and let's see, in verse 13, it says, you are the Lord who reigns over your never-ending kingdom through all the ages of time and eternity. And this is key, you are faithful to fulfill every promise you've made. You manifest yourself as kindness in all you do. And then if we skip down to verse 19, it says, every one of your godly lovers receives even more than what they asked for. Isn't that cool? There's a promise that God says, guess what? When you love me, you get more than what you asked for. Come on, is that good? We get more than what we asked for. So good. And then also, if we jump over to chapter 146 in verse 8, it says, you open the eyes of the blind, and you fully restore those who are bent over with shame, and you love those who love and honor you. And I think that part of that is so cool, is so just real that, how many of us have known to be bent over with guilt, or bent over with shame, and bent over with resentment and hurt, and oh my gosh, God, I regret that, or that we live sometimes so much in our past, and we say oh my gosh, all this, but that God says, no, even though you might be bent over with shame, I can undo all that. And that, and again, this is the part, we're going to keep on going further into this, but when guilt and shame is a tape that keeps on playing back in my mind, that is, again, it's the voice of fear. And God says, I need to stop the tape that you're playing back. And realizing that actually that guilt and shame constantly plays over our mind. We constantly analyze it. We constantly hear that playing back. And what we don't realize until sometimes too late is that voice that is playing back in our mind, those hurts, those emotions that are playing in our heads, that influences the decisions, that actually influences the belief system, and it lastly influences the relationships we have. Relationships that I come in contact with are literally completely influenced by this tape that's not stopping and constantly playing back. And so that's why I said, or like God is just so jealous for us. And he's attacking a fear with a vengeance because he knows that when we are constantly stuck in this cycle of going back to the past, going back to what scared us, or going back to what gave us shame or gave us guilt, that is what keeps us from being able to actually live the full life he's called us to do, and actually keeps us from receiving unconditional love from God. And then sometimes what I haven't realized is like, not only does it hinder me from receiving unconditional love from God, but it actually hinders me from receiving unconditional love from other people. So like my family and my friends and the people that I'm in community with, like those people that keeps me, that voice of fear, that voice of shame, the voice of guilt, it keeps me from actually having a real in-depth relationship with the people around me. And we're also going to go into Proverbs 3. You don't have to turn there, I'll just read it. Trust in the Lord completely and do not rely on your own opinions. With all your heart, rely on him to guide you, and he will lead you in every decision you make. Become intimate with him in whatever you do, and he will lead you wherever you go. Don't think for a moment that you know it all, for wisdom comes when you adore him with undivided devotion and avoid everything that's wrong. Then you will find the healing refreshment your body and spirit longs for. Glorify God with all your wealth, honoring him with your very best. With every increase that comes to you, then every dimension of your life will overflow with blessings from an uncontainable source of inner joy. That's a really beautiful promise. I want to just highlight a couple parts of that, and we're going to dive into this in a little bit, is trust in the Lord completely and lean not on your own understanding. And what is so cool is that what the Lord's been showing me is that when I listen to suspicion and when I listen to fear, that's my own understanding. And I encourage you, and this is something the Lord showed me, and I want to pass this on to us too, is when we're reading through Proverbs and you hear, very often you hear Solomon go back between what the voice of wisdom is saying and what the voice of the enemy says or what the voice of foolishness is. And what the Lord showed me is that the voice of wisdom is obviously him speaking, but actually when the voice of the fool or the voice of something that's not right is speaking, it's actually fear. And so you can take everything we're saying tonight, and if you actually read through Proverbs, you actually begin to see actually this dialogue that there's like two voices contending in your heart. It's the voice of wisdom and it's the voice of the enemy, or also known as the voice of fear. Because fear is one of the biggest motivators, right? Like I can be motivated by love and joy, and you think about it, like, so go back to the example we had before. I can be a salesperson who motivates out of joy, saying, look how much you're going to enjoy this. You should buy this car because it's going to give you this in your life. It's going to make you this happy, all this kind of stuff, right? So that I'm motivated out of joy to do something. Or some approaches are like, you never know when you're gonna, be stranded, and you better probably want to have a car because, you never know. You can never trust your friends. You never can trust public transportation, so you probably need to buy a car, right? So look, I'm going for the same thing, but actually my motivation's different, right? And so the enemy, there's two voices that are contending for my heart, and it's the voice of wisdom, it's the voice of God, and it's the voice of the enemy, and it's the voice of fear. Because perfect love casts out fear. God's love in my life, God's unconditional love moving and breathing through me, motivating me for everything I'm doing, that is where it's called to be. Or it's the enemy saying, I'm trying to scare you into doing something. I'm trying to give you fear. But God says, his perfect love comes in. He says, no, I'm kicking that out. He comes into our heart and he says, my perfect love is going to cast out that fear, because you weren't meant to live to be motivated by fear. You're meant to be lived and motivated by my unconditional love for you. Deception cannot heal us. And that's one of the really crazy things, is that when I'm listening to fear and I listen to guilt and I listen to shame, that's literally deception. And I realized like how I was actually using deception to actually take care of myself. And that's how we're now going to talk about protecting. When I get hurt, emotionally, especially as a young person, one of the ways that I can process that is I can say, I'm really hurt, and I need to run to, and usually when I'm younger, I run to my parents, right? And I say, I'm hurt. I need to feel validated. This person said something mean to me, or, I was trying to be nice to this person, and they weren't nice to me back. So normally, if I'm a young kid and that happens, I run to my parents and I say, hey, he hurt me, or she hurt me, and can you help me process this pain? And that's a healthy way to do it. Or if I'm trying to be prideful, and if I'm trying to, be sufficient and trying to be myself, then my response is this, and this probably is what we identify them with the most, is this person hurt me, they said something that's not nice, or they pushed me down, or they hurt me, right? And then what's my response? My response is, I'm not going to go near that person again. Or, I'm not going to, I said this to them, so I'm not going to say that again, because if I say that again, it's going to provoke this response from them. And what actually happens when I start to do that is I actually start to manage other people. And that phrase, how many guys recognize that phrase, right? And again, I really didn't understand what that phrase meant, because I'm like, last time I checked, I'm waiting for everybody else to kind of be the way that I want them to be to me. Honestly, just if we're just being real, honestly, a lot of us, we say oh, well, I just want you to be better towards me, right? But actually realizing that that's me, what's happening is, when accountability comes, they say, guess what, you're managing somebody. You're like, no, I'm not. I just want you to do what I'm asking you to do. and then it's you kind of realize you don't realize you're actually looking at a mirror, and then the person's like, hey, they kind of go like this in front of you. You're like, did you realize you're looking in a mirror yet? Oh, got it. All right, yeah. So that's what that is. For me, it was okay, I'm actually managing people, and so realizing that when I get hurt, when I decide basically it's a math equation, right? If I do this, this happens. So the simplest thing is I just won't do that. For example, it's you go to the doctor, right? And they make a joke. They say, I'm at the doctor's office and I say, this hurts when I do this. And the doctor says, well, just don't do that, right? But that's not healing, right? And I think sometimes that's the principle that we have for our life is we heal ourselves by saying, it hurts when I do this, so I'm just not going to do that anymore. But how many of us know that God says, I didn't die on the cross so you could just not move your leg and drag your leg all around. I died on the cross so that I could heal your leg so you can keep on moving and walking through around. Come on. That's exactly how it works. And and the fear says to me, I'm not, it hurts when I go like this, so I'm not going to do that. Or it hurts when I tell this person, that they're nice. Or it hurts when I try and communicate love to somebody. It hurts when I say I love you. Or it hurts when I say that I'm hurting or that I'm stressed or that it hurts for you to be like that. So I'm just not going to be that way. But really, actually, what's happening is we're getting motivated by fear, because instead of actually saying, you know what, I'm allowed to be myself. I'm allowed to go like this and not be so afraid about how the person over here is going to react. I'm allowed to swing my arms, I'm allowed to jump up and down and raise my hands and not worry about the person next to me, because God designed for me to be that way. Come on, right? That's how we're meant to be. So if that's how I'm meant to be and moving around, then it's really silly for me to go around saying, okay, well, I guess I should stop moving. No, actually I just say, okay, God, so show me where's the break, where's the block that's keeping me from being myself? Because anytime that I'm not being myself with somebody else, it's fear that's keeping me from doing it. Because I, in my own protection, am trying to say, I didn't hurt when I got pushed down at the playground back when I was 5. So in order for me to protect myself from getting pushed down and getting hurt on the playground, I'm not going to do this. And it's a perfectly valid thing, right? As a kid, you're like, okay, yeah, hello, obviously, you can't really blame us for thinking that way, because we're like, it hurt when they pushed me. I don't want to get pushed again. But actually realizing that when we partner with trying to manage ourselves, when we partner with saying, oh, I have to change something about myself, or the people have to change something about them, that's actually fear. And that's actually buying the voice of the enemy, because that's the enemy coming up next to me saying, oh, then just don't do this. Because the enemy wants to restrict me. The enemy wants to keep me from being free. So he wants to say, oh, guess what? It hurt when you did that, didn't it? Yeah, it really hurt. Okay, well, guess what? Just don't do that anymore. Okay, yeah, you're right. That's a good idea. And look, he's just laughing because he's like, guess what? They're not going to move their arm anymore. Ha ha, yay! But that's really how it goes. And realizing that that's how I protect myself. So when we say this phrase, fear is my protector, that's what we're saying is that I'm using math, I'm using my head to say, I'm going to protect myself by not doing something. I'm going to protect myself by, not being open with people. So you people that they say like, oh, they're not very vulnerable, they're not really open. That's them protecting themselves, because when I got open, I got hurt. When I was being vulnerable, it hurt me. And so they're saying, look, I don't want to get hurt. So guess what? I'm going to do whatever I can to keep my wall up, because that's this wall is keeping me from falling down on the playground, and I don't want to fall down on the playground anymore. That hurt. I got scrapes and bruises, and I don't want to get more scrapes and bruises, right? And the best part is that God says, I'm protecting you. He says, I don't want you to get hurt. I don't like it when you got pushed down. Like, that was not okay. But he has a different solution than the solution that I have. And this is the best part, is that God says, hey, I'm going to trade you. You're trying to keep yourself from getting hurt, but I want you to trust me. Give me, just let's try this. Michael, just trust me by giving this to me. And watch how actually I have a solution for that. Guess what, Michael? You know what? Michael, I love you, and I'm sorry that you felt so alone that you had to try and protect yourself because you felt like nobody was going to protect you. And actually, you know what, Michael? I have a different solution for you. And you know what? It's going to involve protection. It's going to involve you feeling safe, but you don't have to be restricted anymore. You don't have to live a life that's half-lived. I have a way to protect you. I have a way to keep you safe. I have a way for you to enjoy, but guess what? It involves you living a life that's full. And right now, you're missing out on life. Right now, Michael, you're missing out on half of your life. And I want you to get it back. And I want to give you a solution that is going to protect you, it's going to save you, but it doesn't involve you having to give up your soul. It doesn't involve you having to give up your life. And that's the great part, is that in this process, fear starts masking itself as discernment. And that's also a huge, huge thing, because growing up in my family, my family is so blessed, like legit so blessed to have such prophetic voice, to have such discernment and wisdom that's passed down in my genealogy. Like literally, I really am so passionate and so excited that like on my family line there is a generational inheritance of wisdom, of prophetic discernment and insight. And so I love that culture that my family has, and I love living in it and being the benefactor of it. And I realized for the longest time, I was trying to protect myself, and I thought I was being discerning. I thought that I was being wise. And I realized that because I so wanted to be able to operate in that gifting that my family has of wisdom and discernment. And there were things in me that were genuine wisdom, that were genuine discernment, and that was great and wonderful. But there was the places in my heart that God didn't show me until recently that I was thinking it was discernment. I thought it was wisdom, but actually it was fear speaking. And one of the things I want to just bring to light is, what is the difference between fear speaking and what is discernment speaking? And one of the things that fear does is fear keeps me from encountering and appreciating unconditional love. And so if you find in your heart, I'm not experiencing unconditional love yet, like I don't think I can genuinely say I've experienced unconditional love, then I would beg to invite you to say, then I might have fear speaking into me. Because if I let discernment speak into me, I don't miss out on unconditional love. But if I let fear be the voice of my heart, I'm going to miss out on unconditional love. And fear is going to keep me in a way from experiencing the parachute opening moment. And what I'd like to say is this: when we're in relationship with God or with other people, when unconditional love and discernment is my operating model, there's going to be moments I'm going to take huge risks, not knowing what's going to happen, and with the full trust that God, I just took a risk in being vulnerable, but I know the parachute's going to open. And when I have discernment and I have unconditional love in my heart, I'm going to experience those parachute opening moments. And it's in those like parachute moments where oh my gosh, God, I trust you. I trust that when I step off the ledge and I took a risk in my relationship with you, or I took a relationship risk with my family, that like you saved me and like the parachute opened for me. But when fear is speaking in my heart, I won't make any decision unless I know the ground underneath me is there. And that's the difference, is that discernment says, don't jump off the ledge yet, but now jump off of it. Fear says, don't jump off the ledge unless there's a floor. So like, it kind of sounds the same, right? Like, so discernment's going to tell me, okay, I don't just go around jumping in front of cars, but if God says at a specific moment, now go and jump, I'm going to jump, right? But I'm doing it because I know that God's inviting it and God's leading it, and I trust God. I don't trust the action, right? So, but the funny thing is that the action looks the same. So in my head, I can't distinguish it. I can't distinguish when discernment's speaking. I can't distinguish when fear is speaking because I don't know when to jump off the ledge. And fear naturally says, I need to make sure there's a bottom first because I don't want to jump over the ledge unless there's a bottom. But what happens is when I live off like that, I never get to experience the moment when trust happens. They call it trust fall for a reason. Like when I never get to experience the trust fall with God. I never get to experience the trust fall in my relationships because I'm constantly trying to protect. I'm constantly trying to make sure that I don't get hurt when I fall off the edge. And what fear is going to say is, because I'm so afraid to get hurt, because I'm so afraid that I'm just going to fall and plummet to the earth and hit my head on the ground, I'm going to make sure that I am completely convinced that you're going to respond the way that I want you to respond. So before I take a step in my relationship with God, or before I take a step in my relationship with my family, I need to make sure that they're going to give me exactly what I'm looking for so that I know the outcome, so that when I take the ledge, I'm going to go, okay, I knew that was going to happen. Okay, like I knew it was going to be safe. Like they reassured me, the floor's there. Yeah, the floor's there. Yeah, I'm going to do this. And I get hurt when I'm constantly telling the person, hey, can you give me what I need? Can you like give me the feed I'm looking for to make me know it's going to be okay? Can you do this for me? And they're like, I don't know what you want. And they're sitting on this side. They're going, I don't know what you want. Like, you got to tell, like, I'm giving you as much as I can. Like, I don't know how else I can say this. Like, it's okay, all this stuff. And you're like, but no, you're not giving me what I want. Like, you're not giving me the genuineness, or you're not giving me, like, there's maybe a way that you could twist that, or maybe there's a way that could be like, you being passive aggressive. And they're like, no, like, I'm not being passive aggressive. I'm just actually being like real, but like, I don't know how else to convince you that I'm being real. And then we're standing on this side and they're like, yeah, but I can see how it's a little bit. And you see it goes on and on and on. And you realize this whole time I've never taken a step because I'm constantly waiting for the floor to come up. I'm waiting for the floor to appear. And I'm just standing here waiting. Oh, the floor hasn't come in yet. I can't take a step because there's nothing for me to stand on. And with God, it's the same thing. He's standing here. He's like, guess what? I died on the cross for you. I'm the only Son of God, and I came and I sacrificed myself for you. I showed it to you by dying on the cross. What else do you want me to give you? What else do you want me to show you? And you're like, but God, you did that 2,000. He's like, but that's all I did. Like, I don't know how else to show you. Like, that's really it. And you're like, okay. And literally, God's like, guess what? The floor is never going to appear. You're going to have to one day take the step of trust and literally fall and wait for the parachute to open. And that's the life that we've been called to live. But so many times we're so afraid because we're like, if I do this is going to be like on the playground when I was 5, and I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to get skinned up. I'm going to get bruised. And God's like, guess what? I can't convince you to do this. You're literally going to have to take the risk. You're literally going to have to just jump. And I can guarantee you, like, okay, let me help you, right? So you see your friend over there? Yeah, I see it. Okay, guess what? When they jumped off, do you saw the parachute opened? Oh yeah, they're right. I saw the parachute open. Okay, good. So guess what? It's going to happen for you too. Oh, but then I go, but wait, that parachute was made by somebody else, God. That my parachute was made by somebody else. And he's like, no, it's okay. You can do it. You can jump off, right? But it's the same thing. And that's how we run our mind, right? But like, realize it's fear speaking, right? We'd be crazy yelling at this person going, yo, you got to chill. Like, you got fear speaking all up in you. You got to just stop it. Like, you just got to know that you're going to jump off and God's going to be there. And again, we call that a testimony. When we see the other people jumping off the ledge and they see the parachute opening, we're going like, guess what? I can be risky in a relationship. Oh my gosh, I can be vulnerable in a relationship. It's okay because the parachute opens, right? But until I literally just like take the jump off and feel the parachute opening, I'm not going to be encouraged to do it again. So I literally have to take those risks. And that's the trade that God's asking us. He says, are you willing to give and exchange the voice of fear in your heart for my trust and for my love? Because my love and my trust for you is going to change. And that's what's going to bring you the breakthrough. But you have to encounter it. And you know what's so funny? Like, and this is, I think this will help too, right? So how many of us know like what a poker face is, right? And how many of us know like what a conspiracy theorist is, right? And I'd like to just propose, we sometimes are the biggest conspiracy theorists. And we are sometimes the biggest poker faces because we go through, and like, honestly, I'm like a serial offender. Like, and this is what God's like changing me of, like, that like, you know what? Like, I'm a conspiracy theorist when it comes to relationship. And like, God, thank you that you healed that up over me. And like, you've been using this whole process of my life to change me. I'm definitely not that today, but there was a point in my life when I was. And so like, thank you, God, that like, I'm not that anymore. But like, some of us can really be like serial conspiracy theorists with relationships. And like, we can be some serious poker face judgers. Like we think life is a poker game. And we think everybody is playing poker and I got to know their poker face. And so I constantly am feeding into myself lies. I'm constantly feeding myself fear because I'm like, somebody has a poker face. somebody has a poker face, no, this is the deep state, something's happening, like it's going to be the apocalypse, I have to prepare for Armageddon, that's, how many of us know, we look at people that talk like this, and we're like, oh, they're crazy. But we do this all the time with the people in front of us. We do this with God. We do this with the people around us because we're constantly like, what's their poker face? I know they got a poker face. There's nobody in this life that doesn't have a poker face. Or we go no, there has to be conspiracy. I'm so smart. I know that really on the deep down inside, this is really what you mean. Or that I really know that I just know because, I saw this. I saw that little wink in your eye. I saw that little move of your lips and I know it's wrong. I know it's just not evil and bad. I see it. You see, I just saw the enemy in you. I'm going to cast it out now. See how smart I am? I have such discernment. I saw the enemy in you. It's the games we play. And honestly, I think God just sometimes laughs. He's like, yo, you're tripping. He's like, you are seeing stuff that he's like, you're seeing things, man. And it's not the seer annoying. He's like, you're trying so hard to put something there that's not there. He's like, just let it go. Oh my gosh. But that's really the heart of it, right? It's we just realize this is really what our hearts are doing all the time. And sometimes it's so good just to let it out because we're like, okay, yeah, you're right, that's ridiculous. I'm sorry. But this is the part is that even as funny as it sounds, it gets really scary again because we realize, there's no choice. I'm literally going to have to jump off the edge. Yeah. And that's scary. Look, it's really fun to kind of, laughter brings up the endorphins. It lets us know it's going to be okay. But at the end of the day, it's still a scary decision. Because we're still jumping off the ledge. And that's still scary. But the best part is that God is going to bring us through this. And remember what we talked about in Proverbs 3. He's like, rely on me to guide you. And that's why I think that's so beautiful about Proverbs is he's like, yes, what? He's like, hey, Michael, I'm going to guide you. My wisdom is going to lead you. And he's like, I just want you just to trust me. I just want you to trust me. Trust me that my wisdom is speaking to you and that I'm going to take you through this in places. And he speaks to the conspiracy theory in us. So if you ever feel like I'm feeling like the conspiracy theorist, you just look at this and you go, Proverbs 3:6. Don't think for a moment that you know it all. Okay, Jesus, thank you. I don't know it all. Because we sometimes get it in our head. Oh, I know that's what they meant, or I know that's how they are. I know, God, that you just are messing with me. And God's like, I'm not a passive-aggressive God. He's like, you got to stop trying to make a conspiracy out of theory. He's like, think about it. The enemy, Satan, was the first conspiracy theorist, and and that's the biggest thing. And he wants everybody else to become little conspiracy theorists with him. Because what's funny with the enemy's lies? Sometimes you can't prove it and you can't disprove it. And we get so hung up with the fact that I can't disprove it, so it must be proven. It's like, no, you can't prove it either. The lies of the enemy are just meant to be conspiracy theorists. And we just have to say, okay, I don't know it all. Okay, thank you, Jesus. I don't know it all. All right, good. So if I don't know it all, just what we've been talking about on Thursday, God, I trust the mystery more than I try to make an answer for it. Because that makes me a conspiracy theorist. That makes me a fear-motivated person when I try to understand it all. Because that's what the enemy spoke to Eve. He spoke to Eve. He said, you don't understand it all. Guess what? God, you're missing out from something, and maybe you're missing out. You probably should get more info. And we're like, oh, maybe I do need to get more info. And it's like, no, actually, you have everything. You have everything, and you need to just stop thinking that that you're missing something, because you're not. Because God actually has given you everything. He's given you his son. He's given you his spirit, and trust me, you're not going to miss it. God is going to speak to you. He speaks to you all the time, and you're not going to miss it, and you can just relish and enjoy it. The other funny thing about guilt and shame is that it accuses, and it doesn't let up. And the funny thing is, as I've become more cognizant of the voice of fear in my heart and my life, I'm realizing it doesn't let up, and it actually accuses. And because it's getting mad, because it's like, oh shoot, he's onto us. And they're like, now it's in full mode. So when guilt and shame starts to speak again, it's really trying to play dirty now. And it's going in, it's like, oh, I'm accusing. Oh no, look at you. Look how best. Oh, look how they are, right? So it goes from being this very passive, I'm just being wise, I'm being discerning. And it's actually no, wait, and now it's oh no, they're bad. Oh, look at that. Oh, you see, oh yeah, oh, like that. God, the guilt and shame game likes to accuse. And so in your heart, when you start really feeling this poke, because guess what? When God shows you something, it's not this knife in your chest that doesn't stop. You're right? That's not God. but God is gentle and he instructs you gently, right? Just like it says in Proverbs 3, he's like, I'm going to gently instruct you. And when there's that emotion in your heart that's like poking you and it's not letting go, and that's not God. There's a difference between the God when he's like not letting off something, and trust me, when you've experienced that, then you know the difference between when the enemy's doing it. So there's two different things, and again, that's part of the enemy. He tries to call that out. He tries, this is God speaking to you. I'm convicting you in your heart. That's the enemy's trying to mask itself and say, oh, this. But when you've had the authentic, when you've had God hold that into your heart, then you know the difference. You're like, oh, no, I know that's not you. So again, just call that when you use that, when it's not letting up and it's that accusation voice, you say, okay, I just know that's fear. Okay, I'm not going to take that. That's okay. And the really great thing about discernment is that sometimes, even for myself, God's really challenged my mind on discernment, is that because sometimes discernment can look like, oh, they know the thoughts of other people, or like they just knew that's how they were. And it's like, wow, I like to be able to read minds too. I can read somebody's mind. And the really nice thing is that discernment isn't that at all. Discernment is actually perfect love. And actually, discernment discernment is not this gifting that's meant to be like, Michael, watch out, this person's a bad person. You might not want to get next to them. That's not discernment. Discernment actually says, is actually wisdom and actually is guidance. So actually realizing that I want discernment not because it's going to warn me from everything that's bad in the world, but I want discernment because it's actually God's reality. Yeah. And that when I realize that actually discernment is actually God's reality speaking into me, that I say, okay, God, I actually want your voice of discernment in my life because it's going to speak love. It's going to speak the truth. And when I realize that truth is actually the greater reality than fear. And again, when I'm trying to control by fear, I'm actually substituting the reality that truth's given. And I'm saying, okay, because again, perfect love casts out fear. So fear is diametrically opposed to truth. So anytime there's truth, fear wants to try and speak against it. So I can say, wait a second, so you're trying to speak against it? Guess what? Truth's coming in. God, give me discernment, give me wisdom. And it's a fancy word for God's voice. It's God's voice of wisdom speaking to you saying, guess what? This is the truth. The truth is that my promises are never going to fail. My promise is that you are always going to be by my side, that I'm always going to protect you. And that's the truth. And that's a promise that we stand on. We say, God, I believe your promises are never failing. I'm going to stand on that. And it gets back into the standing of being in the truth and really like, okay, God, am I standing in the truth? And before I move on with that, I wanted to say one thing about vulnerability is that's probably the most primary way that we can break our walls down with fear. So if what we're talking about tonight sounds like oh my gosh, yeah, that's me, literally the best way to do it is vulnerable. And I just want to give this example. So fear is my protector, right? We established that. So when I partner with the voice of fear, I'm putting up a wall to keep me from getting hurt. What happens is when I'm vulnerable, I let that wall down. So literally, by me being vulnerable and actually just talking to somebody, I'm literally taking that wall of fear that I set up when I was like 2 years old, and I literally bring it down, and I say, okay, now what? And this is the beautiful part, is that God says, okay, when you come and you're vulnerable, and you bring this wall down, now you actually can have access to my protection. Because he says, I'm not going to come in and invade your wall, because I want you to feel safe. So he says, I'm waiting for you to let your wall down. I say, okay, I'm waiting to let my wall down. And he says, okay, now come into my arms, because now my arms are going to hold you. Now my arms are going to protect you. And so there's an exchange. And this is the best part, is that I encourage all of us in those moments where we feel fearful in our relationships or with God, that the biggest thing that we can do is just call it out and just be vulnerable about it, because what happens is there's an exchange that takes place, because I say, okay, I'm going to be vulnerable, which means I'm going to put down this fake wall of fear, and instead I'm going to receive an exchange that follows protection. And the best thing about being vulnerable is that there's this misconception that I'm going to be open to attack, but it's wrong. The truth is that when I'm vulnerable, I'm actually exchanging for the protection of God. And so literally all you have to ask yourself, what I have to ask myself is, okay, when I am feeling protected by fear, I'm going to say, God, I'm going to be vulnerable, because when I'm vulnerable, I'm going to run into your arms and exchange the protection. So there's never a moment that I'm going to be unguarded, or I'm going to be, out like, open season for the enemy, right? When I'm vulnerable, there's an exchange that happens immediately. The fear wall breaks down, and God embraces me with his arms and says, okay, now you're protected. And now you can actually live a full life. And I also want to say this too. Laughter is really cool. And one thing that I've been doing with the Lord, which has been so fun, is when the voices of fear or guilt and shame starts to start talking, I ask God, I say, God, what are you doing? And I can't tell you how many times he's like, I'm punching fear in the mouth. And I encourage like all of us, like when you're feeling fear, when you're feeling guilt, when you're feeling shame, just say, God, what are you doing right now? And I guarantee you, he's going to show you he's doing something violent to the enemy. Because he's like, I'm not having you speak to my kids. And like, because the enemy wants to make you think like, oh, I get to speak into you can't have this. But actually realize God's like, just shut up. Boom. Yeah, I'm taking you out. And the best part is it's so funny because actually this has become really fun now where in my routine with the Lord, when voice of fear and shame is speaking, I hear laughter. And because at first it started with me because I realized actually, God, you're laughing at the enemy. And now I literally hear laughter. Whenever that voice comes up, I literally hear God laughing. And I'm like, oh, I know I can laugh at that too. So when the enemy speaks fear, when the enemy speaks guilt and shame, and he starts laughing, and I hear God laughing, I'm like, aha, okay. And guess what? It goes right away. It literally goes, and the fun part is that in the beginning, it took a while. It took maybe some minutes, maybe a couple hours, maybe talking with somebody to kind of break that fear down, maybe break that lie down. But now it's becoming easier. Where literally, it just comes up for a second. I just go, haha, you think you're so funny. And gone, literally it's gone. And I want to use that as a testimony for us that in us processing with the Lord, in us breaking down these fear walls, that there's an exchange that takes place automatically with the Father, but also that laughter is a beautiful way to displace it. And it is a beautiful way to just come against it and just silence the voice and say, oh my gosh, like that's so ludicrous. That's literally what I say is like, he starts singing this, I said, oh, that's so ludicrous. Because I'm like, wow, like you really think that like I would actually believe that? Or like, wow, you actually think that like, all this is there. It's just like, it's like anybody, like those conspiracy theorists that you hear out there, what is the first thing we usually do? We start laughing. We're like, hey, you believe that? You believe that the chairs are going to grow arms and walk around? I can't believe you believe that, right? Because it totally delegitimizes what the enemy's trying to bring up. Because it's literally silliness. It's literally silliness. And that's the best part is that fear is literally stupid. Like, fear is literally stupid and silly. And it lacks the truth of God. And that's why it robs us so much in our life, because it lacks the truth that God actually meant for us. Because it lacks the truth, it lacks the vibrancy and the reality that God brings in for and has in destiny for our life. And one of the really great things is like fear creates panic, and panic causes me to be knee-jerky. But when I give up control, it also looks like it might bring chaos. But this is the best part, is that some people fear giving up control. And I would like to propose that when we give up control, we never actually give up control, because the enemy wants to say this. The enemy says, when you give up control, there's nobody touching the wheel, which means there's going to be chaos. And that's when fear sets in, right? So that sounds very familiar. There's chaos. There's nobody's in control. Fear now, right? I have a reason to be fearful. But actually now I'm going to start training my brain to say, okay, when I give up control, I'm actually giving control over to somebody else. I'm giving it to God. So I'm actually never in chaos. So people can say, you gave up control? It's like, yeah, guess what? I gave control into somebody else's hands, right? And that's a beautiful thing too. And again, just practical core values that I want to really encourage us as we walk away tonight is that God, like I choose to believe that God, you are that good to me. Because fear wants to challenge the goodness of God. Fear wants to challenge the nature of God. And instead I say, God, I dare to believe that you're that good to me. So now when the enemy comes up with something that kind of might feel legitimate, I say, actually, you know what? Instead, I'm going to trade this time. God, I'm going to believe that actually you can do something much better than I can concoct. So I'm going to give up my understanding, just like we said in Proverbs. I'm going to give up my understanding, and I'm going to trade and say, God, I believe that you're that good to me. I'm going to believe that you can satisfy the deepest desires of my heart, and that you're a rewarder of those who earnestly seek you. And I believe that you are going to give me something better than what I'm trying to believe. And also that I'm choosing love. And that's another core value in this process of replacing fear, is that I say I choose love. Because love, oftentimes we talk about this like, oh, I'm falling in love, right? And that's a really cute thing to say, but it's actually not accurate. And it actually diligent, and sometimes actually pulls out the weight that actually is meant when we say that we actually love somebody. Because love is a choice. Jesus didn't fall in love with us. Jesus loved us, and he said, I choose you. And that's one of the most powerful statements that we can say, especially to God, is we say, God, I feel really scared right now. I feel like this isn't going to work out, but I choose to love you. I choose your love. And in our relationships, it's the same thing. Like, it feels really scary for me to believe that you're going to stir my heart. It feels really scary that you're not going to trample all over my emotions when I share this with you. But actually I say, but I choose love. I choose love in you. Because I choose that you love me unconditionally, I'm going to trust that. And I'm also going to choose to love you unconditionally and not hold an offense against you and not hold anything that you say against you or against me, and trust that you have the best interest at heart. And that's one of the beautiful things, is like this core value that God, you can be gooder to me than anything that I can imagine. God, I dare to believe that you are that good, that you can do far above my imagination, and that I also believe that I choose you. And so in this process, against my emotions, against my fear, I say, I choose you, God. I choose your promise over my fear. I choose your promise over what the enemy is trying to say. And in that choice is going to feel against your emotions. It's going to feel wrong. But the more that I make that choice of love, the more my emotions start to line up with it, and the more the voice of fear dies. And when fear dies, perfect love casts out all fear, which means I live the full life that God has meant for me to live. So I encourage you with that. I just want to pray over us real quick. Father, I thank you so much that you are releasing your unconditional love over us in Jesus' name. We just blast out the enemy. We just laugh. Yeah, we just laugh at darkness. We say you're silly and stupid and you have no good ideas. And we say that right now, we break down our walls of fear and we say, God, we choose you. We say yes to your promises. We love you and we receive what you have for us. In Jesus' name, amen.